We were bemused when it first appeared, that brand new borderline that seared 300 miles long, not half an inch thick. It would surely be gone in no more than a tick. For that line was never meant to be more than a temporary boundary. We trusted Feetham, Fisher and McNeil to make huge transfers, not a backroom deal. Fermanagh, Tyrone and Derry City left out. South Armagh, the Mournes moved to the south. What would be left up north could never persist, and the border would vanish into our Celtic mist.
But a century later it still stands square, except up close, where it's not even there, an imaginary line that cuts to our bones. Further back you go, the more real it becomes. Still it lingers in the mind long after, framing those years of strife and slaughter, a man-made feature of geography. Even Google now follows its trajectory. Yet this line that circumscribes our lives exists in many forms and guises. Changing often, it befuddles and deceives, and its districts come in all shapes and sizes.
For centuries they've glared at each other, twin sentinels at the mouth of a border. Greenore and its lordship long shorn from Greencastle's kingdom of Mourne. Merheven's plain and Cooley country were part of Ulster once, you see, but now from Kilkeel to Ardee loud the voices fall down to a silent valley. In past times McGingas looked down from Slieve Fada, Slieve Ban and Knockshee to see the advance of England's crown on Foy, Eagles Rock and Anglesey.
Then, as the waters widen and narrow back, each stronghold matched across the loch, Carlingford, Rostrevor, Warrenpoint, O'Meath, meeting where Newry pulls away from Dundalk. When a royal mint and King John's Keep once marked a pale that England could reap, stout Bagnall's castle was a means to prevail in the war to bridle the Kinnell Enail.
Yet a rebellious spirit survived in Newry, nurtured by Mitchell, De Valera and Rowntree, until the roadside slaughter of a Miami show band where civil rights marchers had made their stand. When the North erupted, families broke for the border. Many stayed on, and that caused some disorder. In a town dubbed El Paso that remained on the brink with a heavy gang and subversion fueled by drink.
The border was a battlefield from the very get-go, and among those it claimed were Oliver and Ludlow, until the RUC top brass drove home by Ednapa and Buchanan and Breen were slain in the trap. Then modern warriors at Narrowwater Keep gathered charred flesh as they waded knee-deep, picking up fragments of their young comrades lost when blown to kingdom come in an IRA double blast.
And where a hotel once stood, please still count the cost, and a score of their officers whose lives were lost. Nearly half of them died in a single onslaught as mortars rained down and flattened their fort. Then the fog descends on the Parisian wood, where my old friend Ruddy, his head in a hood, was tortured and killed as if to presage his hometown consumed by that killing rage.
Until a peace train shunted across Craigmore, sweeping away much that went on before. A new prosperity beckoned for shopping as Neuro reversed the old border hopping. Rising up from the marshes, a new city charter shrugs off its troubles as southerners barter, while on mobile phones they loudly chatter and stare wide-eyed at the price of life's water. Back in the south, a wounded tiger licks a sore and stretches its limbs to roar out once more in a lair of pristine mouths ringed by a fence of new highways and core-blimey confidence.
Now, where twin customs and army scrutineers once kept up their constant reconnoiters, a motorway sweeps along by Eden Tubber with not even a nod to the rebel martyrs. For this has always been frontier terrain, the ancient playground of Cuchulainn, each faltering foothold fought for and won beneath the brow of Flagstaff's frown.
By the gap of the north and the 3 steps bar, we enter the ring of Gullion and South Armagh. A place once avoided because of cloak and dagger, its people had to endure the military swagger. Where O'Hanlon once ruled over his terrain, Slieve Gullion still presents its rich domain, and Crossleave presides over Mullaban's plain as squaddies look down with hilltop disdain.
On a fabled land of night cattle drives, across Forkills roads into Inniskeen and Hackball's Cross, and fort where pilgrims still come to pray at the sacred shrine of Nave Bridge of the Gael. This holy place, desecrated and shocked, also sweeps north by a crooked loch to Aiken's home and back by the courses of a train of slaughter for all the king's horses.
Then west across over a silver bridge of Craig and Sheila and Cullyhanna's Ridge, where MacLennan nestled in their charms until ringed by towers and men-at-arms. It's hard now to believe that this quiet wee spot changed so completely when Harry was shot. Then Provo recruits rallied to McVerry's call and soon became the very deadliest of them all. But with cock assurance, Danny Boy set out to tame and cajole this defiant redoubt, and by night he played at his own dirty game, shifting between sides to stack up the blame.
For a bloody sequence of deadly tit for tat, flowing from the Miami massacre, so that Tullyvallen, Donnelly's, the Reeves, Kingsmills were added to a catalogue of mindless kills. Peter Cleary, taken out in the dead of night. Wee Magella, shot by day through a soldier's sight. Troopers Benner, Barucki, and so many more. It soon defied efforts to keep track of the score. SAS on the ground and choppers in the air. This once quiet place soon caught in the glare of the media that never stopped to ask why. It was outlawed and reviled as bandit country. And as the watchtowers rose above this place, those hostile outsiders deemed it a disgrace that forces of the crown were not free to roam through a part of Ireland that was never their home.
For in Craggan churchyard lied poets of a nation who kept alive their rich Gaelic civilization, long after the fuse had failed to convince, until recalled with pride by a scholarly prince. For this is a land of pavy winks and nodding, except of British soldiers not even worth ignoring. A place of learning and furtive glances across the floor too at Blaney's dances.
All this was destined for the Free State until that backroom deal sealed its sad fate, consigning it once more to Britannia's rule and the banded country tag of a political fool. From Bessbrook Mill, a tangled web they spin over these far-flung frontiers of HM's reign, until their hilltop posts were toppled flat, they left at last and go Nairac and Boherlat.
From Blaney's Castle, we now head north through the Scotch country districts that start at Mullyash Lodges, once hoping to switch to the other side of a Dorsey ditch. Through Hamilton's new town that sits on the fringe of darkly times when murder and mayhem impinge on lonely gospel halls, while a death squad cringes in UDR uniforms for more victims to extinguish.
Yet tucked together like fatal twins on the map, these Oriel counties continued to trade and swap. But don't bother asking as they move along sprightly on unapproved roads. Actually, they'll do us rightly. Past Katy Town and Wilder Noose, a Fairgert road twists like the neck of a goose to Clontibret, where O'Neill once vanquished. Robinson came to boast and then was banished. Past the ruined remains of one stout Castle Shane, we swing to west to inspect, and perhaps even detain, where Monaghan town presides in all of its glory, staunchly Protestant once, but that's another story.
Honouring an officer of the Crown with stately aplomb, a huge obelisk in Church Square still looks down from its lofty vantage over a county town where 7 lives were ripped apart in a UVF bomb. Yet, through the decades of trouble and strife, they flocked here from the north to experience life, not fixed from birth or who or what you are. They saw it distorted through glass in a bar. For lurking right here and plotting away were squads of volunteers of the Provo IRA, with Lina and others yet destined to fall, on a night when the SAS lay wait at Lochgall.
Back to that line we move off once again, by silver stream roads where once hand and pen orange men marched along to a different tune, and so we now bear down on Miltown. Another huge fortress blocked the way from Eamon Donnelly's home to Armagh City, where repose the remains of King Brian Boru, a holy see, but a troubled way through.
Here city status sits uneasily on a town's picturesque mall and stately homes, where Usher once charted his outlay, or where we began until our judgment day. Yet where Patrick brought Macha hope of salvation, her children's staked out rival views of the nation, the orange and green pitted in a deadly battle with gunfire, bombs and a deafening drum rattle. From the diamond affray, the rival sides began to roll back enlightenment and the rights of man, dividing the united Irishmen into them and us, and obliterating Henry Joy in the loyalist cause. The gap was taken up by a gang from Glenanne, whose bloodletting started and then ran and into the mixed road a deadly border fox, whose tour of terror defied all roadblocks.
So now, the years since that point in time, Armagh has been tainted with sectarian grime. It's a holy demise, but what a dreadful pity for a place once vaunted as our agreed capital city.
Back on our fickle frontier, meanwhile, 3 Ulster counties converge at a stile linking Glasla with Tynan and Caledon, Leslie, Alexanders and the family strong. Sprung from one stock, but of varied allegiance, neighbours living on the frontiers of tolerance, until the Strongs were butchered in the dead of night, and historic Tynan Abbey was then set alight.
Recoiling from such horror, we first make our way, where rising sons of William thunder through Killalay, then into Tyrone, where civil rights calls began, when an MP's girl's house couldn't go to her B-man. Back in the day, fierce gun battles raged here, with squadrons of specials sent to ward off the fear, while upstart rebels from now had their free state rattled with British guns to get through the gate. Craigavon was the rock, and he stood his ground to hold Clogher's Valley and all the way round. And just beyond my bridge, we paused where we should, for young Aidan McInespy shot down in cold blood. For the IRAs, this district's a cradle for heroes. From the first blanket man to die in the throes, Mackay, Harts, McKerneys and many others, their roll of honour is a band of lost brothers. Yet for those on the other side of the fence, there's always a uniform to don for defence. A, B and C specials, RUC and UDR, an alphabet of security to notch up the score.
The East Tyrone IRA sowed Protestant fear here when they slaughtered 8 squaddies and 4 UDR, but the Glenanne UVF had brought a fresh angle by adding this district to its murder triangle.
Now here on the main Dublin to Derry highway, an ominous checkpoint has now given way to a road sign that makes intercity traffic wait as a tractor trundles by and heads for a gate. So further into the valley we make our way out, shunning Ballygawley and its double roundabout. From our true quest now we cannot waver, as we set off in search of a royal favour. But a stately ruin is all that's left to tell of that long ago night when they seized Anketel, dragging him off by their own cruel whims, as the old man sang out loudly his loyalist hymns. Through every phase of strife and trouble, there was an armed bastion, a loyalist bubble. South of Blackwater, but still in the north, a Republican bought it for what that is worth.
In a high mountain bog at a wild place called Bragan, great diggers are poking the sod and dragging in hopes of finding poor Columba's remains, shot in the head in 75 and just dumped in its drains. Monaghan sticks up into County Tyrone here, a sharp trajectory British generals dubbed the spur, where McKenna's meet O'Neill's, and all the way up they cheered as Canavan carried home Maguire's cup. Past Áher to Clogher's village cathedral city, where McCartan of Oriel rooted his Christianity. But bitter words, fear and threat still divide Christians from those who are on the other side.
In a high lake hollow where 3 counties meet, near Sean Berna's stables they gather to greet. Neighbours from Tidavnet, Clogher and Rosslea. 3 counties, 3 parishes converged on Slieve Bay. Up where the Rapparee once hunted and harried, the young volunteer McIlwain never tarried, until gunned down by the SAS in a border trap and shot dead in the head to halt his gallop. In his native Knockatalan he still makes his mark, in a memorial to match another at nearby Altawark, where South and O'Hanlon are recalled to tell, for generations of rebels, this has been a crucible. The border has been erupting here since back in the day, when Spencer was shot and the specials burnt Rosslea. The IRA came out in force and they shot 3 more, and the daggers were drawn as both sides went to war.
So around Dernabout Cross and the foothills below, loyalists don uniforms and take up arms to show that might is still right and always on their side. Yet when they're killed, it's called religious genocide. Past Inver and Lackey into Clonus town we now go, by a blind lock where Stuart defeated Owen Roe. It was perched on the cusp of a new free state, cheek by jowl with the line that would seal its sad faith.
At the foot of the town in the old railway station, a pivotal act marked the split of a divided nation. 4 specials and Fitzpatrick were killed in the affray, causing both sides to dig in and go their own way. This was once the hub of the old GNR, a pivotal rail junction for all of South Ulster. Partition, of course, changed all of that. Within a few decades, the town was busted flat. It's another district where the roads are jumbled, impossible to tell whenever you've stumbled from north to south and then torn about till the Brits blasted craters to remove any doubt. At first, people came to protest and toil at opening those roads while hoping to foil the might of an empire digging its last ditch to seal its terrain from any thoughts of a switch. Then Creighton, Bale, Young, Murray and Nan, the death list began, and it just ran and ran until a mongrel fox was finally run to ground, bleeding to death in a ditch with barely a sound.
A tidal shift followed from that dreadful day as the Dublin government turned sharply away. From a town marooned, a parish split, then slowly starved of life, a treble hit. Shoved to the side, so readily forgotten, a community in crisis, and its misbegotten sons sent to jail for what they still held as true, acts of patriotism to them, just terrorism to you. Yet even in the darkness, as all hope disappeared, a young boxer emerged and all Ulster cheered when he brought home a world featherweight crown. Leave the fighting to McGuigan and save his hometown. But jobs lost and moved while shops shut their doors. The town withered and died from its festering sores. Yet year after year, for Ulster finals of the GAA, it rolled out its frayed carpet to put on a display.
By Drummully's lost town lands we now take our leave, encircled by the border, cut off from reprieve. Along an abandoned canal we'll take our last hike, where a black pig once guarded its own Ulster dyke. Past Wattle Bridge, where old songs of Erin tell of Williamite slaughter, we now take a turn. To the west, where the border sweeps on, by once sturdy, now gutted Castle Sanderson. Where back in those bygone days of yore, the Colonel said Ulster must hold out for more. Yet his 9 counties into 6 would not finally go, so they ditched 70,000 brethren and put on a big show.
Near the broad road gates of that domain, a senior Garda came with some of his men to check out the device left in a tea chest. It exploded, killing Inspector Sam in the blast. In Belturbet, where Breffni kings once had their home, we pay homage to 2 young lives lost in a UVF bomb. A marina now nestles in the heart of this town, linking the great waterways of Erin and Shannon. But north of here, on the road to Enniskillen, the bullocks were slain, and the cost of the killing was total destruction of the old bridge at Ahalean. Now Mitchell's Peace Bridge connects them again.
Louis Leonard was killed in his own butcher's shop. Then Sanderson, Murphy and John Maddox. 2 years of bloodletting in the wee village of Derrylin before it spawned the empire of the once mighty Quinn. Sean built his huge business from a hole in the ground, creating thousands of jobs for all the folk around. Then he banked it all on an all or nothing wager, losing the lot that bore his nomenclature. While Quinn was forced to leave the stage, Dublin Jimmy stepped in to feed on local outrage, running his border rackets with no regard to the law. But when Lunny was abducted, he went much too far. And south of the Upper Loch, an ancient frontier divides the dioceses of Clochar and Kilmore. The sound of old allegiance is still there, by the way, in the accents of Knockninny and Kenawley today.
From the humours of Ballyconnell we divert once more to pay our quick visit to the town of Balnamore, for famed Shergar is said to have run his final race in another gambling episode that ended in disgrace. So from the border districts round Slieve Rusheen, as angels fear to tread where the devil has been, we take a stairway to heaven our souls to save, and find some respite at the Marble Arch Caves. Florence Court nestles nearby in Georgian glory, with National Trust delights to distract from the gory details of a catalogue of UDR and peace slain in the Belcoo killings around Loch Macnain. This was the scene of an early frontier to-do when the IRA stormed the barracks in 1922, taking 15 hostages from the old IRC. They were all RUC by the time they were free.
And near Black Lion, the legendary Shannon Pot reminds us of what we should do and what we cannot. Today, that message might just mean rehab at Loughlin House, where they held the IRA's slab. Back by Derrygonley, we see Donegal from afar, rising up from the Erne beyond Loch Navarre. But before we go there, we divert back by Melvin to hunt for Gillaroo in the wee cove of Garrison.
From rebel McDermott's stony woods we set out to view the watery border that lies hereabout, where the Erne falls into the great wild Atlantic and an early border invasion caused Unionist panic. As Collins' plans for the invasion came a cropper, and IRA Northern Division simply had to drop her, comrades joined up to show the West was awake as armed men moved into the town of Balleek.
Then gun-toting Hazel was the Orange Lady of the Loch, steering a boatload of specials right up to the dock of the Petticoat Triangle occupied by the old IRA when the Crown brought its guns to clear them away. For decades thereafter, the Bundoran Express shunted Ulster to the seaside to rest and relax, while dipping and dancing and cutting a dash in breaks for the border that cost all their cash. We were only teens when the Troubles broke out, mingling in Bundoran with never a doubt. Things would get better, but how could we know? They'd last all the years as our own kids would grow. In a grim seaside hotel we gathered to see the Battle of the Bogside on a black and white TV. As two armies were sent up to the front, we watched boys our own age still bearing the brunt.
Our anger was growing as they stood idly by. We protested loudly, demanding to know why. Then Ballyshannon burst like a dam on the Erne, when they lifted Joe O'Neill from his own tavern. But Barstool heroes still sang out summer refrains about old brigade boys and the nation once again. Yet as the years passed, those songs lost their lustre, as the Troubles continued to engulf all of Ulster. Border Protestants around Garrison all moved away when the UDR's Fletcher was shot by the IRA. Then Michael Leonard lost the chase on a border track, and as he raced for the line and was shot in the back.
The IRA's Fleming drowned in a Banna flood. His comrade Anton was shot down where he stood. As SAS man Ian Slater was killed in the same ambush when they thwarted an IRA bomb at Drumrush. Then the world recoiled in shock and dismay when a Poppy Day explosion blasted 12 lives away. So Enniskillen was added to the lists of outrage, while a Tullyhumman bomb just failed to engage. But IRA misadventures weren't over by far. When Gillian was riddled in her own daddy's car. In West Fermanagh, the botched list only got worse, as Hazard, Love and Keys were added, of course.
Now orange ranks are depleted in old Donegal, but every July border lodges come one and all, each with a big banner and its own marching band, to spend a day tramping around Rossnowla Strand. I take a rhododendron road through Petticoat to see an old rebel and socialist before I go. But saintly Loch Derg in the Lettercran earth, Mary Reyes, though questions linger on her death. We take leave at Scraggy's Circle of Stone as we're heading off into the County Tyrone. And as our fickle frontier continues to coil, we leave the Erne watershed for that of Foyle.
I Erne balloons out to the Barnasmore Gap, turning our border world bottom over top, where the Finn lies in the south, just to the north, and the Killen fields flow to the Derg River's mouth. As youngsters watched him die in an IRA trap, within a fortnight she was killed in an evil tit-for-tat. 2 horror deaths at one small village post office, remembered alone because their dead are not of us.
So young loyalists march along our frontier with pride, recalling bandsmen Michael and Norman who died. While Davidson tears for his lost sister Heather, they were both on patrol and almost taken together. And when Republicans prayed to recall their own dead from Ferguson's Crescent up the Castlefin Road, to the unattached observer, the tunes sound the same, whether they're playing the sash or the Patriot game.
Winston Donnell was the first UDR man to die, shot dead on patrol near the bridge at Clady. Yet the young Protestant men continued to join in the footsteps of fathers who fought at the Boyne. In a corner off the graveyard on the Drumquin Road lay some of those who reaped what division sowed. Armed in uniform as servants of the Crown, many were off duty when they were gunned down.
An evil bomb was the final full stop on a sentence of death that formed the backdrop for separated lives of fear and suspicion till Good Friday's Pact came to heal the division. By a confluence of streams the rivers now pool, Drumra, Camoan, Freywater and Strill. At Newton the Ganelli joins Owen Calloo, meeting the Derg to form the Mourne we knew. From a checkpoint tower the squatties look down, as Mourne now meets Finn at the edge of 2 towns. 2 counties, 2 rivers, now foiled in lockstep. The border lies between them, lest you'd forget.
Back in the day, Donegal's lads and lasses flocked to the hiring fair to join the masses, looking for strong farmers to give them a job, back-breaking drudgery for just a few bob.
The jobs had all gone when the Troubles broke out, and the failure of partition never left any doubt. That west of the Ban, the future was bleak, as gerrymandered wards were just given a tweak. For Donegal's area and English rose an IRA era began, when they hijacked a chopper and flew over Strabane. With a pass to the Cubs at the head of the town, they turned for the barracks and rained the bombs down.
The bombs kept coming, and every single boom sounded another sad chapter in Strabane's doom. As each day began with no work and no hope, soon the Ra and the Earps could barely cope. With queues of young martyrs towing up to the line, and the youngest of them all was David Devine, cut to pieces in a hail when the SAS went in, along with his big brother and Charlie Breslin. A huge retail sprawl now fills the space left when the squaddies flew from their camel's hump nest, and with peace again the tinnies moved in and invited one and all to let the dance begin.
East Donegal was slated to be switched in the 1925 report they summarily ditched. Still Ulster Scots linger in the Lagan's rich soil as Ballymagorry and Breedy peep over the foil. We backtrack the course that Docra went along when he took on Tyrone and fortified Dunalong. Past St Johnson and Carrigan's we now find our way with Mahara Mason opposite at the foot of the brae.
Into the city we sweep past a scene of abuse, for foul crimes against Waynes have no border excuse. Then into the bogside and its free dairy wall, where 50 years of domination started to fall.
At the time of partition, Derry City was strong, with shirt factories, the port and whisky, along with 5 railway lines and a big hinterland, but it all fell off the rim of Northern Ireland. Second city or fourth, it never mattered much, for always when it came right down to the crunch on jobs, votes or university, there was no chance when stacked up against the Unionist stance. Yet World War II was a blessing for the city beset, with 20,000 sailors then caught in its net, and the 60s showed there was no us and them when crossing the floor to dance up at the Mem.
So McCann, McLennan, Cooper and Hume and all their comrades could only assume that protest and publicity would win them the day, but after Bloody Sunday the IRA held sway. The Troubles had started, and first to die was a dairyman called Sammy Devaney, yet as the death tolls rose, each side could see only those who fitted into their own story. Still for a good while Free Derry held out, till its barricades fell to the motorman's clout. Then many others felt the law's full measure when lifted and held at Her Majesty's pleasure. Then the sides dug in and the shooting started, while many neighbours and good friends parted, as the city was changed on both sides of the river, till only the fountain hung on as a loyal sliver.
From out of the chaos a young butcher emerged to lead the IRA as the two sides diverged, unleashing a wave of mayhem and murder that spilled over and back on the nearby border. And still under siege by their own city walls, apprentice boys rallied each year to the calls. To remember the boom and the shutting of gates, they tramped to make sure no one deviates.
From grievances and glories over hundreds of years that spilled onto the streets along with the tears. For Bernadette, Carol, Damien and Annette, and 13 other children too young to forget. Atrocities were frequent, but among the very worst was one that caused a dam of outrage to burst, when Patsy was forced to drive that deadly device right into a border checkpoint and his own suicide. Then, from out of the fire and right into the pan, stepped Derry's quiet fish and chip shop man, with a mountain climber who in turn would meet the IRA's leader, and they talked of peace. Derry was the very first to give it a chance, as Clinton, Blair and Ahern did their dance. In Guildhall pledges of a fair share from now on, those vows were broken as soon as they'd gone.
So a millennium and a half since Columbus' time, his oak grove still waits for its future to shine. No university, no jobs, and little law and order, it has to make do on its own unwanted border.
From Ileach's Greenan
in a show and stretches up, like a giant speech bubble that rises from Burt, with Burnfoot and Fawn showing the way to Buncrana's beaches to frolic and play. And deep in the night the UDA gang burst through the door, and then bang, bang. As Eddie lay there in his own pool of blood, they fled back to Derry as quick as they could.
And from these flowing hills of Donegal they flocked into Derry, one and all, to stitch and sew in a shirt factory mill, so all Derry ones have a Donegal grand still. But back into the south we make our way forth, under a bridge of despair we sail to the north, past Boomhall, Thornhill and Culmore Bay, with Strathfoyle and Lissahallie over the way. The quays are now silent, where the U-boats lay when Germany surrendered back in the day. As we steer our way out past the last dock, the vast open waters stretch over the loch.
Then from the west to the east, an aeroplane sweeps into the runway that once guarded the deeps, long after the removal of a double bluff, when the Eglinton replaced the other muff.
Nobody quite knows where the border sits beneath the waves that carry these ships around Quigley's Point, closed by the strand where oysters now flourish in no man's land.
Then Eyeless in Gaza the hooded men came for 5 techniques without anyone to blame. Among those who locked them in the military lair, named for an explorer from County Kildare.
And the setting sun over Iskaheen lights up the horror from Halloween, when Irwin, Knight and Deany burst into the party to wreak their very worst. It was another night of horror, truth to tell, when the bombers targeted a drop-in well. 11 soldiers among the 17 lives lost. The reason given was to teach England the cost. But back to the loch by a brighter road, where a ploughman unearthed his hoard of gold, left to appease the ancient sea god of yore, as Manning MacLear looks down from Gortmore. He sees no border on the scene he surveys, from his prow to Maville nestling over the waves, where liners once tendered passengers ashore to Monty's dear old Irish home once more. Bloody Sunday began on McGilligan Strand, where paras beat protesters who made a stand, beside the huts where detainees were caged, as England's killing machine was fully engaged.
Then another green castle grazes over the loch, with another Warren Point lighthouse still keeping watch. This time they've shifted to opposite shore, as if to balance history's mistakes once more. Then beneath our keel in the Sea of Moyle, a final border passage on the waves of foil. We sail out of the border on a stream of sorrow, with only the prospects of Brexit tomorrow.
On our 300-mile canter from loch to loch, we've visited real places and seen the impact of locality split and neighbours divided by a line that none of them ever decided should measure where their true allegiance lay, for none of them was given any real say in a quirk of history, a political construct that started as temporary and then just stuck. For unlike other borders where people reside knowing they differ from those on the other side, on this contested frontier of many deceptions we identify as Irish with so very few exceptions.
By ties of blood and cultural connections, we've shared our hopes and recollections, friends and neighbours, living side by side, until politicians imposed a new divide. So over the course of 100 years, measured in days of blood, sweat and tears, we've hoped and coped and counted the cost of communities split and so many lives lost. Families and neighbours caught in the line have suffered from partition as if by design. For borders are constructed solely to divide people from those put on the other side.